Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. I woke up before the sun. No alarm. Habit. Night shift trained me to notice the room first. The cabin smelled like coffee grounds and pine cleaner from last night. The little inverter blinked green on the counter. The charge held. The cats were already working the edges of the kitchen. June watched the mouse hole under the sink. Cricket sat on the window shelf, tail flicking at nothing. Baxter lifted his head from the rug and thumped his tail twice. He only does that when he wants to tell me the morning is safe. It did not feel safe, but the room said otherwise, so I got up. I put water on the propane stove and fed everyone first. Baxter got rice with a little canned chicken. The cats got dry food with spoon broth. I try not to talk to them much out loud. I do it anyway. Good morning, June. Good morning, Cricket. Good morning, Bax. The dog's ears moved at the sound of his name. I do not baby talk him. He understands plain words better. Coffee next. I ground the last of the beans by hand. It is slow, but it keeps my head straight. I pour, I wait, I count, I pour again. My old boss at the hotel used to say count anything you can control when the rest of it goes sideways. He was right about that and not much else. I took my mug to the table and opened the notebook. 12 years of night reports taught me to write morning notes too, even if no one reads them. I put the date and wrote, morning cold, sky clear, no frost, solar at good level, cats hunting, dog calm. The radio sat on the shelf by the window. It never looks like much. Black box, stubby antenna, taped label that says, do not trust first news. I turned it on and set volume low, static. I held the antenna at the glass pane. A farm report pushed through. Weather for the next county. Dry week, light wind, burn ban still in place. No mention of anything else. I tried the local station out of town. Static again. I left it on, in case the signal climbed later. I stepped out onto the porch. The trees on the far ridge were still just shapes. I could hear the creek in its normal voice, which means the rain last week soaked in instead of running off. That matters. The path down to the water was clear. No branches on it. No tracks in the mud except for deer from yesterday. Baxter sniffed the air and stuck close to my leg. He is old, but the nose still works. The cats do not come outside in the morning. That is a house rule I do not break. I checked the solar panels. I brush them even when I do not need to. Dust steals power fast. I looked in the battery box and tightened the main lug. No swelling. No rotten egg smell. I know what bad looks like. This was fine. I went around back and looked at the little shed where I keep tools and what I call the people kit. The kit is not a weapon stash. It is soft stuff for when a stranger shows up hurt or useless or both. Bandages, extra socks, a plastic poncho, granola bars I do not like, so I do not eat them. Around 7 in the morning I heard the first shot. One shot only, far off. Could have been a truck backfire from the east road, except the echo rolled from the south valley. I stood still. Baxter leaned against my leg as if that meant anything. I counted to 60 in my head and listened for more. Nothing. I went inside and turned the radio knob again. Static. Add. Static. The end of a church program. Then a tone. Long. It cut through everything. I turned volume up. A flat voice read an alert. Not the usual weather line. It was a public safety bulletin about a fast-spreading outbreak. The phrasing was careful, which made it worse. Stay off the roads. Avoid hospitals unless instructed. Shelter in place. Do not approach violent persons even if the person is known to you. That sentence held too long in my head. I turned volume down until the words blurred. I have seen panic before. Fires at the hotel. Domestic fights that spill into the lobby. I have stood with a mop while paramedics tried to bring a man back from nothing. Panic always starts with a person who wants to help, and a person who wants someone else to fix it. If you are the kind who writes reports, you learn to move your hands first, then talk. I closed the radio and started my list out loud. Lock the doors. Gear check. Food check. Water check. Firewood set. Animals safe. Communication. Exit plan. Eyes open. I went room to room, windows latched, door bar set. The front door has a steel plate I made from a farming implement I found at a yard sale. It puts weight into the studs. The back door has a simple 2x4 slide I cut to length. I do not like the back door. It looks at the trees, and the trees look back. I clicked off the porch light even though it was day. Light after dark draws people the way it draws moths. I keep food in rotation, nothing fancy. Rice, beans, oats, canned peaches, canned chicken, peanut butter, salt. I counted days in my head and wrote a new number in the notebook. The number is mine. I will not say it out loud. I topped off the footlocker with water jugs and added a few drops of bleach to the one that has sat too long. I filled the kettle. The creek makes me lazy sometimes. I fixed that today. Baxter patrolled the window line with me. He huffed once at a squirrel. I told him, "Leave it." He did. He understands simple orders if you keep your tone flat. June crawled into the bookshelf in the bedroom and vanished. Cricket settled onto the back of the couch where he can see the door and the stove. The animals have their own plan. I respect it. The second shot came near 8 o'clock. 2 shots this time. Close enough to tell it was not a backfire. Sharp, then sharp again, then a scream that died into the trees. I do not like that word, but that is what it was. You know the difference between a hurt sound and a theater sound when you hear it alone in the woods. I put the mug down and went to the closet. I keep a small carbine because coyotes pull calves, and because people are people. It is light and simple, and it does not make my shoulder angry. I do not decorate it. I keep the sling clean and the oil boring. I pulled it out, checked clear, loaded, checked again. I took a strip of cartridges and slid it into my pocket. I put the first aid pouch on my belt. I put on the orange hat I wear during deer season, not because I plan to use it, but because I want a bright color if someone with a badge shows up with a shaky hand. I stood at the back door and listened. The valley went quiet in a way I only hear right before a thunderstorm when the front has not reached the ridge yet. No birds near the house. The creek sounded louder in the space the birds left. My head wanted a reason. Wind shift, hawk, early cold front. The radio voice put a different reason on the table, and I did not want that one. I opened the door and stepped onto the stoop. The man came out of the brush without warning. He moved like he should have been tired but could not feel it. His face had that smooth set I have seen on people who are trying to hold it together at 2 in the morning in a lobby that smells like bleach. He stumbled and caught himself on the rail. I brought the carbine up without thinking, and then froze because he said my name. "Evan," he said. His voice had mud in it. "Help." I knew him. Not well. He was the logging hand who parks near the old fire road every spring. He buys diesel in town and drinks orange soda out of a glass bottle. And he brings a dog that is part blue heeler, part question mark. I have waved to him twice from my truck. He is a 2-word friend. Morning, evening. I looked for the dog and did not see it. I saw blood on his sleeve. Fresh, not dried. He left a wet handprint on my railing. "Stop." I held the carbine at his chest but did not point it at his face. "Tell me where you are hurt." He lifted his arm. 2 gouges and a chunk missing from the back of his forearm. Not a clean bite. A tear. Tooth marks along the edges. Struggling in brush will do that. Human teeth look different. I am not an expert. I have broken up fights. I know what a mouth can do. This had both. He tried to talk again and swayed. He did not smell like alcohol. He smelled like creek water and wet clothes that sat in a pile too long. "You need to sit," I said. "I have bandages." I opened the door and stepped back 2 paces. Baxter came to the edge of the kitchen and growled low. I pointed. "Place." He backed to the rug. June never came out. Cricket flattened and watched with big eyes. The man took 1 clumsy step into the kitchen and his boot left a dark print on the old wood floor. I put him in the chair by the table and cut the sleeve away. The tissue around the gouges had a bad color I will not describe beyond saying it did not belong on a living person. I rinsed with clean water, then with a weak bleach mix, gentle as I could. He jerked and tensed, but he did not curse me out, which told me more about his state than anything else. When you pour bleach on a wound and a man says nothing, that man is on a thin edge. "Tell me your name again," I said. I knew it once. He had told me last spring. It did not come now. "Dale." He stared at the far wall. His eyes had trouble fixing on me. He bit me. "Who is he?" I kept my voice even. "Not he." He swallowed. "Was." He pointed at the door, then his finger drifted down to the floor. He looked for his dog without moving his head. He did not find him. Was him. Now not him. I wrapped his arm and taped it tight. I said the next words because the training says to give a person a job to pull him back to the room. "Hold this pressure. Keep pressure steady." I pressed his hand onto the bandage. He obeyed, but his fingers slid. I put his hand back and he did it again. I looked at his pupils. One bigger than the other. That can mean many things. None of them good. The radio in the other room clicked. A new tone. I did not go to it. I did not want to hear any more instructions from a voice that could not see the bleeding man at my table. Dale lifted his head. He tried to say something about the fire road and a truck on its side. I caught a few words. The rest were fog. He sagged forward and slid to the floor. I moved the chair and eased him down to keep his head from hitting. His eyes went distant. His grip loosened to nothing. I checked his breathing. He took 3 uneven draws, then none. I have been in this room when a raccoon died on the porch. I have carried a neighbor's old hound to the truck when his hips quit. I have not had a man die on my floor. I watched his chest. No rise, no sound. I pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck and told myself the truth. He was gone. I stayed on the floor with him for a long count. I did not do anything dramatic. I watched his face because the radio voice in my head said, "Do not approach violent persons even if the person is known to you." And the new rule of the day had not yet proven itself wrong. His jaw moved. That is not a metaphor. His jaw moved. The rest of him did not. His eyelids opened halfway. He took no breath. He reached without a breath and without a voice. He reached clumsy and strong. I slid back on my heels, and he kept coming, hands crooked and wrong. I stood and put the table between us. Baxter barked once, a deep, hard bark, and the cats vanished under the couch. Dale came around the table fast in a way that did not match the way he moved when he was alive. I lifted the carbine and shouted his name. He did not stop. He did not hear. His mouth worked and clicked. I put the front sight on the bridge of his nose, because that is what people who know more than me say to do when a person will not stop and you will not get a second try. I stopped saying his name and I squeezed. I will not paint it. I will say what it did. It stopped him. He went down and stayed down. The room smelled like cold metal, and the shock I know from indoor shots. My ears did not ring the way they do at the range because the old rugs and books drank the sound, but the air still felt wrong. Baxter pressed against my thigh. I kept the sight on Dale's face for a long 10 count and then longer. When I was sure, I lowered the rifle and leaned it against the counter without letting it fall. My hands could not find steady. I cleaned. I checked. I stepped around the spot on the floor. I put a towel over his face and another over his arm. I locked the front door. I locked the back door. I walked a loop through the cabin and checked every window again, even though that would not bring anything back. I turned the radio up in the other room, and the voice kept talking about shelters and safe sites and phone numbers that no one would answer. I turned it down. I dragged Dale's body onto the old wool blanket by the door and pulled him to the mudroom. No way to move him outside without leaving marks and calling in anything that uses scent. I set the mudroom door and wedged the bottom with a rubber doorstop. It is not a good place for him. It is just away from the cats. I put a few drops of bleach into a bucket and left it next to the floor streak. I did not scrub right then. I could not stand the smell the mix would make. I fed the stove and opened the little flue to pull the stink out. Baxter paced and panted. He drank a full bowl and then stood at the door with his head low. I filled his bowl again. He did not touch it. I scratched behind his ear and said, "Guard." He lay down and watched the back door. That is his job when it needs doing. This is the part where I say I am not brave, because I am not. What I am is stubborn and trained to do boring things in order. I went to the shed and took down my line of cans and the spool of thin fishing line. I strung a trip line across the back steps and tied cans that rattled cheap and loud. I set another line at the front steps and one across the dark gap between the shed and the stump where I split wood. I nailed 2 boards with screws poking up and laid them under a scatter of leaves where a person would rush without looking. If a friend showed up, I will shout the warning. If a person who is not himself shows up, his foot will tell me loud and fast. I packed a small bag, not the long-haul bag, the day bag, water, bandages, a flashlight, spare batteries, a map with my pencil marks, a whistle, 2 granola bars, a little radio, a fire starter kit, 1 space blanket. I slipped a fixed blade knife into the outside pocket. I loaded 2 full magazines for the carbine and checked the little revolver I keep at the small of my back when I go out into brush. I do not like wearing both, but this is not a day for taste. Before I left the house, I got the animals set. I moved the cat's litter box into the bathroom and propped the door so it cannot swing shut. I left 2 bowls of water in different rooms so a spill does not leave them dry. I set Baxter's cot under the table and clipped a leash to the leg so I can grab it fast. I gave him the command he knows for quiet. He closed his mouth and watched me with wet eyes. He knows when my voice changes. I stepped out onto the porch and stood at the rail where Dale's handprint dried into a dark smear. I held still for 1 minute. I let the woods tell me what they knew. A woodpecker far off. A branch strain. The creek. No human voice. No engine. I put the carbine on safe and slung it, then stepped off the porch and followed the path to the creek, moving heel to toe to keep noise down. I do not pretend to be a tracker. I just do not step on the loud sticks on purpose. At the creek, I crouched behind the alder and watched the old logging road across the water. It bends around a cut stump and vanishes behind a pile of slash. The county does not keep this road up. Hunters do, and the man in my mudroom did, and he will not again. A bobwhite called and went quiet. I heard something drag through leaves around the bend. Not a deer, not a person who cares about sound. The drag noise stopped and was replaced by a foot that did not know where to put itself. I slid back from the creek and took higher ground. I kept the carbine forward and sighted through the branches. A figure appeared on the road. It was a woman in a torn denim jacket. She moved like she forgot how to stand on uneven ground. Her legs kept going while her shoulders pushed forward. She hit the slash pile and did not step around it. She walked into it, pushing brush down with her shins and then slipping free. Her head turned at a slow rate that did not match the speed of her body. Her mouth opened and closed. No breath sound, just a grind. I could put a shot at this distance. It is not hard at this range. I did not shoot. Distance is a friend. A single figure is a lie. 1 means 5 more behind a tree, and I did not have enough truth to act. I waited. She drifted past the bend and down toward the culvert. A second figure limped into view and stopped at the stump. He wore a ball cap and a shirt with a gas station logo I know from town. His hands worked like he had sticky stuff on them. He looked up into the trees and then down at the ground like a person does when he is trying to remember something. He stepped off the road and went into the brush. The brush shook and then was still. The woman kept going. They were not together in any way that mattered. I pulled back from the creek and went straight uphill along the deer trail that runs behind my shed. At the ridge line, I crouched behind a fallen poplar and glassed the slope with cheap binoculars. The highway in the far valley is never quiet on a weekday morning. It was quiet now, which is not the same as silent. A truck horn blew and held and then cut. A bit of smoke rose near the bridge. 2 small cars sat nose to tail. No flashing lights. No tow truck. The field beyond the bridge had a new burned patch. I watched until my eyes watered, and then I made myself stop. The world at that scale was not going to help me. My world was the 30 acres between my cabin and the ranger station. The station sits on the service road above the North Fork, 10 miles by the trail and less as the crow flies, which is not a measure I can use. If the radio is down here, it may be up there. Or there may be a person with a band radio, or a medic, or nothing, and an empty room. I did not want to go. I did not want to leave my animals. I wanted to shut the door and pretend the problem would stay outside my line of trees. Denial is a luxury for people who do not have blood on their floor. I picked a line of travel that keeps me off the obvious paths, and I started moving. I did not take Baxter. He is brave and loyal, and he will follow me into anything, and he will bark if a thing comes behind me, and that bark could save me, and that bark could also pull a line of dead faces into our lap. He stays with the cats, and the cabin will hold better if he is inside it. I put my hand on his head and told him, I will be back before dark. I said it in the same tone I used to tell drunks that the police are on the way, calm, certain. He watched every word. He lay down when I closed the door. That broke me worse than the sound of the shot. I put that away. I moved. I took the fence line north where the wild grapes run. The leaves hide movement from the meadow. I stayed low and slow. The morning warmed and the bugs came out of the grass. Birds still kept their distance from the creek. Off to the west, something big smashed through brush and did not care about the noise. A human voice drifted once and then cut off. I stopped every 50 paces and listened. When the wind shifted, I smelled the highway again, a sour note under the trees. Half a mile in, I found the blue heeler. The dog lay at the base of a cedar with his body torn open, and the cedar bark scuffed with claw marks and heel drag. Coyotes do not tear like that. Cats do not hunt that way this close to noon. I crouched and looked without touching. Bite marks on the dog's shoulder matched a human pattern. Again, I am not an expert. I have seen enough to call shape from a mess. The dog's eyes were dull, no breath, no twitch. I placed my hand near his nose to be sure, and then I set his body under the cedar a little straighter and covered his head with my bandana. I will bring Dale's blanket later if later comes. I pushed on. At the old fence corner the trail splits. The low path hugs the creek. The high path runs the contour line to the ridge and adds miles. Today I took the high path because water is a corridor for everything that moves, and I had seen enough at the creek. I took extra sips from the bottle and kept the cap clean. I counted steps to keep my head small. 100, pause, listen. 100, pause, listen. The pause saved me at least once in my life. It did again when I heard a shoe scuff on rock somewhere ahead. I went to a knee and brought the carbine up to the edge of a rotting log. 2 men came into view between the beeches. They were breathing hard and carrying a blue cooler between them by the rope handles. The rope cut their fingers and made them stop every few steps. The man in front wore a campus sweatshirt from the community college. The man behind had a jacket with a volunteer fire patch on the sleeve. Neither wore orange. Neither looked at the ground in front of his feet. They argued in short, mean whispers that sounded like brothers who never learned to apologize. I stayed behind the log and watched their hands. No guns, no blades I could see. The cooler swung and water sloshed out the crack in the lid. The fireman sniffed once and shook his head and kept walking. The front man looked back and said, "Shut up and keep moving," in a voice that told me the whisper was only for show. Something answered from the trees. Not a person. It came from a place just off the trail. Both men heard it. The fireman dropped the cooler and reached without thinking. He grabbed the other man's arm with the reflex people use in parking lots when a car backs up too fast. The other man jerked his arm free and shoved him. It was a dumb shove. The fireman fell sideways into brush and his shout stuck in his throat. 3 shapes rose from behind the blowdown. They had been flat. They were not flat now. The front man turned and ran uphill, his shoes kicking gravel into the leaves. The fireman clawed backward and his boot stuck between branches. One of the shapes stepped on his shin with a grinding sound that made the bones in my own leg feel wrong. The other 2 went past him, climbing after the runner with that forward-leaning push I had seen at the creek. I cannot save 2 strangers without putting my name in a ledger I cannot pay. I can save 1 man if the shot angles are clean, and if I do not miss and hit his leg. I picked the one under the branches because he was not moving anywhere without help. I put the front sight on the closest head and I said, "Fireman down," loud enough to cut the air. And he heard me because training hears training. He flattened. I fired once. The head stopped. I moved one step to my right to clear the second angle and fired again. The runner's two chasers turned at the sound and started back toward us. I fired a third shot and told the fireman to crawl to me. He did. He smelled like creek mud and the back of an engine bay. "Weapon?" I asked. He shook his head. His breath tore out of him, and then he caught it again. He looked at the cooler. I said no. We left it. We moved uphill, and then side hill to the right until the blowdown blocked us from whatever came next. I kept the carbine forward. He kept one hand on the ground and one hand on my belt without asking. I did not pull away. We reached a dry shelf and I let him lie flat behind a rotting stump. He looked at my face and tried to read it. I gave him nothing but instructions. "Quiet now. We do not fight for that man. He is moving. We move. Stand only when I stand. Nod." He nodded. He swallowed hard and touched the patch on his sleeve like it would do something. He made a small sound when a shape came around the end of the blowdown and looked straight where we had been. The shape sniffed the air and moved its jaw slow. It took a step toward the cooler, bent, lifted the lid with stiff fingers, and stared into the slosh inside. It put its hand into the water and pulled a bag of ice and a red stain that spread out under the sun. The stiffness of the fingers made the bag tear and ice scattered. The shape sniffed again and drifted away. A second figure followed it, stepping in the runner's prints. We held still until the bees came back to what was left of the bag. We moved farther north. The fireman kept up. He had that set jaw I have seen in people who push through a house fire and come out without remembering the steps. He looked back only twice. I did not scold him for it. He asked for a name. I said Evan. He said Mark. I asked where his truck was. He said the service road, the lot near the ranger station, a few miles ahead. He said he was with a group from town who came up to fill water and to grab first aid supplies from the trail box. He said it fell apart fast on the road when one of the group's kids ran, and his father went after him, and it turned into a chain of bad choices. I told him to save the rest for later. We reached the ridgeline and the view opened through a break in the trees. The ranger tower showed above the pines, a metal ladder up to a platform, the little cabin at the top. I could see nothing move up there. I could not see a person or a flag or a light. I wanted a person to be there with a radio and a clear voice and a map of what to do next. I did not get what I wanted. We dropped off the ridge on the shady side and kept to the rock shelf where our prints would not hold. Near noon we hit the station road. I put up a hand and Mark froze. The road had tracks in the dust. Boots. A small tire mark from a hand truck. Drag marks like someone pulled a deer carcass to the ditch and then decided to leave it. The station lot held 2 trucks and a state truck with the seal on the door. The state truck's door hung open. I saw the corner of a clipboard on the seat and a radio mic on the dash. The shop door stood half open with a broom jammed under it. Cleaners use that trick when the latch sticks. Old habits live in every job. I listened. A woman's voice reached us from inside the shop. Not a moan. Real words. "Is anyone there?" It had a scrape in it. The sound of a person who yelled for too long in dry air. I sighted on the dark gap and watched for movement. "We are armed," I said. "If you are hurt, say so. If you are sick, say so." "I am not sick," she said. "My name is Ranger Collins. I am in the shop with one other person. He is hurt. We need help." Mark whispered. "She is real. That is her." He knew the name. The whisper carried his relief so hard that I worried it would pull trouble from the trees. I told him hand signals only. He nodded. I walked sideways into the lot with the carbine forward and my cheek against the stock and my sight on the gap. The smell hit me first. Oil, bleach, rot. The rot smell was old meat, not fresh, which tells you something, but not enough. I kicked the broom away with the toe of my boot and pushed the door with the muzzle and stepped in. The shop held an ATV on a lift, 2 kayaks, a rack of tools, a pegboard with labels for everything, and a tarp spread on the floor with a man on it. He had a tourniquet on his leg, improvised from a ratchet strap and a stick. The strap bit his thigh deep. A woman in a uniform sat beside him with a clipboard and a pencil, like she was doing intake at a clinic. She glanced up and did not move her hands off the man on the tarp. I saw no sign of bite marks on her. Her skin had the sun pattern of a ranger who lives outside. The man did not move. His breath moved his shirt a little. The tarp rustled under him slow. "Do not come closer," she said. "Close the door." I did. She exhaled for real for the first time in what looked like hours. We locked this end down before the main group went to the tower. They did not come back. She lifted her chin toward a window that looks out at the lot. "You did not pass them. That tells me enough." "What happened to him?" I asked, nodding at the man. "Compound fracture," she said. "Not from a bite. He slipped off the ATV in the culvert, and the wheel pinned him. We got the strap on. Bleeding slowed. Signs were good. Then he started to shake, and then he stopped. And when he woke up again, he tried to tear the strap off with his teeth." She said it like a person who has the details in a row, because that is what keeps the room from turning into a place you cannot stand. I do not think he is sick. I think his body broke under stress and did not bounce back right. She looked at me the way a woman looks at a person who might say yes to a problem. "I cannot evacuate him. I cannot stay here much longer. I need to go to the tower. There is a radio there that still reaches the county net when the weather is good. It is the high ground. The tower is the play." I glanced at Mark. He nodded fast. He wanted a uniform and a plan. I wanted my dogs and cats and my door. "We can get the man into the state truck," I said. "We can drive to the bridge if the road holds, or we can cut through the utility right-of-way on the ATV if it starts." "The keys went with the group," she said. She tapped her radio. "This one is dead. The one at the tower has its own battery bank, solar on the roof. It will talk to anyone still out there if the net is alive." She held my eyes. "We do not leave a living man on a tarp." "Agreed," I said. I went to the man's other side and checked his pulse. It jumped slow under my finger. His skin was cool. He had grit in the lines of his palm. A working man. He stirred and blinked and tried to sit up. The ranger put a hand on his chest and told him plain words. "Stay down. We are moving you. Stay down." He watched her mouth and did what she said. I took the front end of the tarp. Mark took the back. We lifted. He bit down on his teeth and made a sound that I will not put on paper, and we walked him to the door. The ranger opened it. Sun hit the room hard. We put him in the back seat of the state truck with his injured leg flat and the strap still tight. The keys were not in the column and not under the mat. I popped the hood and looked for a bypass that would not cook the computer. There is a line between useful and stupid. I am not going to cross it on a truck I do not own, with a person I do not know as the test subject. "No truck," I said. "We carry him to the tower." "That is up a ladder," Mark said. He looked from the man's leg to the tower and back to the leg. "We get him into the tower base room and wait," I said. "We build a cot there. We do not put him on the ladder. We make a sling and bring water and we keep the door barred. We make a call from the top and see if anyone answers." I did not say what happens if no one answers. The ranger read it anyway. First, we had to move. The lot was too open. We set the tarp down and rigged it into a drag with 2 broom handles and a coil of rope. The ranger took the lead rope. I took the rear to keep the man steady and to watch our 6. Mark ranged to the side with a shovel handle he did not put down even when his hands opened and closed from stress. That is the thing about civilians who volunteer. A tool in the hand is a promise you make to yourself. We crossed the lot. No movement. The tower door stood closed at the base. The padlock hung open along the hasp. The ranger's jaw moved when she saw that. She did not say what I knew she wanted to say about training and checklists and who forgot to relock. She pushed the door with her boot and we slid the man in on the tarp and closed it again. The base room smelled like old paper and dust and mouse droppings. A stack of bottled water sat by the wall with a cracked case. 3 ration tubs sat next to it. Someone had looted one tub and left the other 2 sealed. We built a cot out of old staves and a canvas roll. We put the man on it. He made that same sound, and then lay still. The ranger loosened the strap a fraction and watched the wound. No menacing spray, no sudden flood. The breath in his chest ticked along. She looked at me, and then at the ladder, and then at her radio. "I go up," she said. "You keep eyes here. If you hear nothing, you come up with him." She nodded at Mark. "And I come down." The plan was thin and honest. I liked it better than a polished lie. She climbed. I counted steps again to keep the small fires in my head from turning into something that eats the rest. She reached the platform and unlocked the little door with a key she had under her collar. She went inside. The sound of a cabinet opening. A metal chair dragged. A switch clicked. Another. The light above the tower door came on and threw a square on the grass. That stupid square of light made something in my chest loosen. She keyed the mic. "County Net, this is Ranger Collins at Tower 12. Do you copy?" She paused. Static. "County Net, Tower 12, priority traffic." Static again. Then a voice. Not County Dispatch. A voice that sounded like someone broadcasting from a basement with a power inverter that wants to die. "Tower 12, we read you. Name and status." She answered. Calm. "Collins, alive. 2 civilians with me. 1 non-ambulatory, alive. Immediate area compromised by hostile persons. We need medical advice and we need a sit rep." The voice gave a list instead of comfort. Regional hospitals closed. Local fire on their own. Law enforcement non-responsive in pockets. Military aircraft heard over the interstate around dawn. No landing scene. The voice used plain words. That matters when the world comes apart. It does not fix it. It tells you where the floor is. While she worked the radio, I checked the base room again. Old posters. A map with handwritten notes from last year's controlled burn. A box of glow sticks. I cracked one and shoved it behind the water stack so the dark in that corner was not total. Mark sat on a paint bucket and wiped his hands on his jeans. He looked at the door every time a leaf scraped the threshold. He said a name under his breath. The name was not for me to know. He said it 3 times and then stopped, like he sealed it back up for later. The man on the cot stirred. His eyes opened and focused on the ceiling. He tried to sit up. I put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Stay." He stared at my mouth and then at my hand, and then his eyes slid away and found the door. He breathed fast and shallow. I poured a cap of water and placed it on his lower lip. He wet it, then pushed his head back and shut his mouth. He clenched his jaw. The muscle in his temple jumped. He drifted again. The radio squawked. "Tower 12, advise you avoid Highway 14. Repeat, avoid Highway 14. Major incident on the bridge." The ranger asked for details. The voice said a bus crashed into stalled traffic, and when responders pulled the door, there was a rush and the scene went bad. The voice used the word feeding, then corrected to assault. Words matter on the air. I respect the correction. The meaning is the same. I thought of my cabin. I thought of Baxter's head on his paws and the cats under the couch. The triangle of noise cans at my doors is good for people who are slow and heavy. It is not good for a person with a mind who uses a stick to sweep the ground. I wanted eyes on my porch. I wanted my hands to wrap around my dog's collar and feel the warm coat under my fingers. Wanting is not a plan. I looked at Mark. "We have to go back for my animals before dark," I said. I did not couch it as a wish. I said it as a job. Mark hesitated. The ranger came halfway down the ladder and listened. She looked at my face when I said, "Animals." She watched my jaw. She understood more than the word. "You have dogs?" she asked. "1 dog, 2 cats." She nodded. "You go. I stay with him and hold the base. The radio stays live every hour on the hour. Call on the half. If you do not check in by sunset, I lock this down and assume you are safe at home and I do not come get you." That last sentence is the kind I give myself when I take a risk. She handed it to me clean. I told Mark he did not have to come. He said he would. He said it like a man who had an argument to finish with the world and wanted to pick his ground. I did not talk him out of it. We packed 2 bottles, 1 ration, 1 extra magazine, and 2 glow sticks. We left the broom handles and the rope. We took the shovel handle because Mark now believed in it. The ranger watched us through the gap and said nothing soft. She said, "1 shot means you are fine. 2 shots means you need help. 3 shots means I break the rule about not coming to get you. It was a bad plan, and the only plan. We cut back the way we came and took the high path again. The sun slid behind thin cloud. The light went flat. We moved faster with the ridgeline in front of us and the need to get home pulling instead of the fear of what was ahead pushing. A fox crossed the trail and stopped and stared, and then ran, tail low. I heard a voice in the trees on the slope below. A woman. She sang one line of a hymn, and then stopped, and then sang it again. I did not look for her. I kept my eyes on the ground and counted my steps. Mark looked once, and then locked his eyes on my back. At the fence corner with the blue heeler, I stopped. The bandana I put over his face was gone. The dog lay uncovered, head turned to the side. His lips were pulled back from his teeth, and flies dusted his gums. A line of prints came from the creek and circled him and wandered off. Bare feet, toes splayed wide, no heel set, wet mud marks. I did not say any of that to Mark. He saw enough to pull the shovel handle closer to his chest. We reached my back fence as a wind stirred and pushed the grape leaves flat. The cans on the trip line banged twice and then 3 times, and then went still. I froze. Mark froze. I held up one finger. One figure moved past the shed, and then another. Both wore hunting clothes with orange caps. Both walked with shoulders pulled forward and hands low. One dragged his left foot like his bootlace was tied to a root. They turned their heads in short jerks. One paused and sniffed. I could see his nostrils flare. He took 3 steps toward the porch, and then turned away toward the woodpile, and then to the shed, and then back to the porch like a Roomba that had forgotten its room. We waited. They drifted on. When they were gone, we cut over the fence and went to the porch at a crouch. I slid the board out of the back door's slot, and we went inside fast and closed it soft. The house smelled like old coffee and bleach, and the low sour of a place where fear sat and did not leave with the person who felt it. Baxter cried once from under the table and then pressed himself against my knees. He held his voice. I put both hands on his neck and said his name, and told him the same lie I told him earlier about being back before dark. He wagged his tail against the table leg, and the sound was so normal I almost dropped right there. I did not. I checked the mudroom. Dale was where I left him. The towels were still over him. I will not talk about moving him. I did what needed to be done with a sheet and a loop of rope and a plastic tarp, and I did it without letting the cat see or letting the dog sniff. When it was over, I washed my hands with bleach water and soap until the smell took over the room. I took out the trash. It is a strange sentence to put between all of this, but I did it anyway. Bag out to the burn barrel, lid back on, nothing left in the kitchen to rot or draw a raccoon. Normal chores mean something on a day that erases the rest. I packed a carry crate for the cats. I put Cricket in first because he runs once and then accepts it. June took a minute. She pressed herself into the bookshelf and made a small sound, and then stopped, and allowed me to lift her with a thick towel. I placed her in the crate and latched it and covered it with a dark shirt so she would stop looking for the way out. Baxter went into his harness. He hates it. He stood still, and allowed it because he reads my shoulders like text. I clipped a short lead and a long lead to the ring, and tested the buckles with my fingers and with my eyes. I do not trust one check on a thing I care about. I slung the day bag, clipped the cat crate to a carabiner on the belt, wrapped the long lead around my torso so I could let Baxter range at the edge of the line without losing him, and passed Mark the spare flashlight. He had the shovel handle in his other hand. We stepped onto the porch and the cans did not rattle, which meant the trip lines were still as I left them. I pulled them in and stuffed them in my bag, because noise warnings are honest but they keep me tied to the sound. I want to make my own noise on purpose. We cut west at an angle that keeps the creek on our right shoulder. The cats were silent in the crate. Baxter trotted with his ears high and his tail level. He is not a pup. He knows the job when the leash is tight and the room is small. At the first ravine, we took the low side and crossed where the rocks break surface. Baxter slipped once and caught himself. The crate thumped my hip and I set it on a rock and let my hand rest on the top so the cats could feel it. I said nothing. I listened. A crow called. A woman shouted once from far off, and then another voice answered with no words at all. We moved. On the ridge above the old quarry pond, we stopped. The tower rose a mile off. The sun was sliding. The shadows between the beeches grew long and deep. We had time if nothing slowed us. Nothing listened to that plan. A shape stepped out from behind a maple 20 yards ahead. He wore a sheriff's department jacket. It hung open. His belt was empty. His eyes were not right. He turned his head and stared at the crate and then at the dog and then at me. He took a step and his boots slid on leaves, and he righted without looking down, as if the ground was not part of the problem. "Sir," I said, the first word I use when I want to slow someone down without spooking him. "Stop there." He did not stop. He raised his hands and reached. Baxter growled. I snapped the lead, and his growl cut off. I could not fire with the crate hanging and the dog near the muzzle. I stepped sideways until the maple trunk was between the man and my line, and then I pushed Baxter behind me with my shin. The man hit the trunk with his shoulder and scraped around it. He kept reaching. I fired once and kept moving. He fell and reached again, and then stopped. Mark did not speak. He stared, and then he looked at the tower, and then at the crate, and then at me. We moved again. As we closed on the tower, Mark pointed with the shovel handle. 3 figures stood near the base, close to the door. They wore jeans and work boots, and a quilted vest and a camo jacket from the discount rack. They leaned and swayed like drunks at a bonfire when the music dies, and the bodies do not know yet. Their heads tilted at angles that belonged to sleep, not standing. The door was closed. The padlock hung loose. The top platform light still shone. The ranger would have heard the shots. She would be at the hatch, listening. I did not want to lead a line of these things to her door. We cut down to the creek and worked around to the far side of the tower lot, using the culvert for cover. The cats shifted in the crate. Baxter's nails clicked on the culvert's metal once, and the sound seemed too bright. I crouched and breathed through my nose and waited for the figures to turn. They did not. One leaned his forehead against the door and scraped it slowly, then pulled away, then scraped again. I pictured his skin raw and stopped that picture before it formed all the way. Mark picked up a softball-sized rock and looked at me. I shook my head. He set the rock down soft. I picked up a smaller rock and tossed it into the brush 50 yards left. It rustled and thumped. 2 of the figures turned and drifted toward the sound. The third kept scraping. I tossed another rock farther left. The 2 kept drifting. I gestured. We moved to the right edge of the lot, kept the truck between us and the door, and then stepped into the square of light. The figure at the door turned at once at the light and lunged. He hit the truck fender and bounced and turned again. I brought the carbine up and put the sight where it needed to be and fired once. He fell against the door and slid to the ground. The door moved half an inch. The padlock bumped the hasp. 2 out there still, Mark whispered. Left. I nodded and moved to the door. Ranger, I said low. Open and bar. The lock snicked, and the door opened a slice, and her hand shot out and grabbed the crate handle and pulled. I pushed Baxter through, and then Mark slid in after. I stepped in last and pulled the door shut. The bar dropped. The ranger looked at the crate and at Baxter, and then at the blood on my sleeve, and she gave me a single nod. Not approval, not thanks. Just the notch that says a thing is inside the circle now. I set the crate in the far corner and let the cats out. They shot under the shelf unit and then came back to the crate when they realized it was home with a different roof. Baxter lay down on his cot, chest moving hard, and watched the door as if it would teach him new tricks. The man on the cot moaned once and shifted his leg. The ranger checked him and loosened the strap half a turn and tucked a towel under the edge. The room had that full feeling a place gets when it holds too much life at once. We waited. The 2 figures outside drifted back and leaned against the state truck, and then slid along it, and then wandered to the far fence. One gnawed at the mesh with a soft chittering sound that made the hair on my arm stand up. The light above the door hummed and threw a square on the ground. The radio upstairs clicked. The ranger went halfway up and took the call. She came down with a short list. The county net would push any med guidance when it came. There was no guidance yet. The advice for civilians was to shelter in place and to avoid population centers. If that advice had a taste, it would have been dust. The sun dropped behind the ridge, and the light over the door pulled moths and other things from the air. I killed the light with the breaker and the square went away. The two figures outside stopped their slow motion and stood still for a moment, as if the light had been the string that pulled them. Then they began to move again, hands out, mouths working. We talked through the plan for the night and made it small. 2-hour watches. The ranger and I would split the top watch. Mark would hold the base with the man on the cot and Baxter as a last alarm. I showed him how to latch the inner bar with one hand and how to pull the glow stick into the doorway to backlight the threshold without lighting us up. He learned fast. Firemen are good at that. I climbed to the platform with the ranger. The wind up there was different. It moved around your ears and made you think about edges. I closed the hatch and clipped the safety chain because the body remembers what ladders can do. The radio sat on a little desk with a coffee ring stain. A map of the county lay under a plastic sheet with grease pencil marks that ended 3 days ago. The ranger keyed the mic at the top of the hour. Tower 12, alive, holding, 3 human, 1 injured human, 1 dog, 2 cats. She said the last part like it mattered. It did. It told anyone who heard that a line still held against despair. The voice on the other end said, "Copy 12, hold." Night has jobs, close food, check doors, run water through once so lines do not smell tomorrow, put sharp tools where bare feet will not find them, set a schedule, and then keep it even when no one else cares. We did those jobs. The ranger cleaned a field dressing while I took first watch at the rail and counted the slow shapes that moved along the lot line and then went back into the trees. I saw eyeshine twice at knee level and decided those were raccoons who have their own apocalypse every winter and still come back in spring. On my break, I went down to the base and sat with Baxter. He leaned against me and slept, twitching at the sound of leaves and distant shouts that rose and fell like wind. I rubbed the spot behind his shoulder where he goes soft and told him about the night shift at the hotel, when the power went out and the generator failed, and I had to find flashlights in the housekeeping closet with guests in the lobby who wanted answers. I told him how the only way to keep the room calm was to assign jobs. Hold this flashlight, count these blankets, go to this floor and knock on these doors. The dog blinked slowly and then sighed, and after that I felt like I had told the right story to the right friend. Mark watched the injured man. He asked once if it would have been better to leave him. He did not mean it as cruelty. He meant it as a person who tries to walk a line with no paint on it. I told him plain, we do not leave a living man on a tarp. He nodded. He asked what we do if he stops being a living man. I said the other plain thing, we make it quick. He did not look away. He swallowed and said, I can do it. And I believed him. I did not make him promise. Promises at night are currency with bad exchange rates. Near midnight, the radio caught a signal strong enough to cut through the noise. A voice from a city I will not name said that a large group crossed the interstate on foot and moved toward the river. It gave a number that made my mind tilt. I will write it out anyway. Thousands. Not precise. A lot. Moving together and breaking apart and moving together again. The voice asked anyone on high ground to look for the line and report movement. The ranger stood on the platform rail and scanned with binoculars and wrote notes with her pencil on the plastic-covered map. She marked nothing for our valley. The dark under our trees held its own weather and sound. We lasted through the night because the jobs kept the clock turning. Every 2 hours we swapped. On my last watch before dawn, I looked east and saw a thin, bright line through the branches. I thought of my old room at the hotel where the security monitors cast blue light on my hands. I thought of the coffee at 3 in the morning and the way the elevator chime sounds when the building is empty. I thought of the woman who slept in the lobby chair with her bag under her feet and her hand on the strap. I do not know why she came to me then. Maybe because a person asleep in the wrong place is a kind of mirror for all of us. I shook my head and pushed those thoughts down where they belong when the light changes. Dawn brought a real sound, an engine, not from the highway, a small engine, rough idle, moving through the pines on the service road. The ranger and I looked at each other and did not move our hands. We waited for sight. A four-wheeler rolled into view with two figures on it. Both wore helmets. One wore a bright vest. The machine slowed near the lot gate and stopped. The lead figure raised both hands and held them out to his sides and then lifted the visor. A face I knew from town looked up at us. He ran the small engine repair shop near the diner. He had welded my mower deck 2 summers back when I failed to see a rock under grass. He had a way of talking where every sentence starts with a plan. "Ranger," he called, voice steady, not a shout. "I have 2 kids and a woman at the cut. We need the tower, or we need water, and a direction." He saw my face at the rail and did not show surprise. "Evan, you here? Good. We can work with that." Behind his words I heard a tremor he did not show in his shoulders. I looked at the ranger. She looked at me. The door below us stayed barred. The base room held 1 injured man, 1 fireman with a shovel handle and a stubborn back, 1 dog who understood the shape of the day, 2 cats who will not be quiet if the room gets hot, and 2 adults who needed sleep and coffee. Choices arrived early and wanted an answer before breakfast. I keyed the radio to the base and told Mark, "Stand ready, do not open." He answered by tapping the door bar once. The ranger cupped her hands and called out, "Keep your engine off, come to the gate slow." The man did what she said. The second helmet lifted. A woman's face, drawn tight. The sort of tight that comes after a night spent keeping 2 children alive, while everything else collapses. She did not ask for anything. She put her hands on the kids' shoulders and held them where the gate could hold them back. She looked up at the tower for instruction. She would accept any. We made a plan in under 60 seconds. The ranger would check them at the gate for bites or blood. I would cover from the platform. If they passed, we would let them into the lot but not the base room. I would bring water to the gate and pass it through. We would keep the ATV outside the fence so we had a machine that did not share our air. We would not mix the kids with the injured man and the dog and the cats. It sounds cold. It is not. It is the only way to keep all of those truths in the room at once without one cancelling the other. The check went clean. No bites, no fever, just exhaustion and hunger, and a boy with a scraped knee that had dirt ground into it. The ranger poured water over it and wiped it with a clean cloth, and the boy stared at Baxter through the crack of the base door, like a person who had forgotten what dogs do until that second. Baxter wagged once, and then stilled when I said quiet. The woman asked if we had seen her brother. We had not. The man from the repair shop said he had 3 other adults behind him a mile down, holding a little farm road against a cluster of walkers that got drawn by their cook fire. He said those adults would push to the tower if we gave a signal. The ranger looked at me. I looked at her. We both looked at the map, and then at the lot, and then at the sky. We gave the signal. 3 short blasts on the whistle, then 1 long. The sound cut through the trees and ran down the road. A minute later, the reply came faint. 3 short, 1 long. The ranger stood taller in a way that had nothing to do with her boots. The day had started with blood on my floor and a dead man's handprint on my rail. It was not clean now. It would not be later. But the tower was not a lone stump in a field anymore. We had faces and names in the lot. We had a working voice on the radio. We had a dog sitting quiet and ready. The cats ate from their dishes without complaint. That meant we could hold a little longer. I told the ranger that at noon I would go back to the cabin for 1 more load. More food, more water jugs, extra fuel for the generator in the station shed. I would not wait for permission because time is a tool that dulls fast if you ask too many people to sharpen it. She did not give permission. She gave a nod that said she had already counted my steps in her head. Mark said he would go with me. The repairman said he would send 1 adult to run message between tower and cut. The woman pressed her eyes shut for a second and then opened them and set her jaw. The kids held hands. The sun rose and the light hit the map table. The radio clicked. New voices came and went. The wind smelled the same. The trees held their own counsel. Day 1 is not a story with clean edges. It is a string of rooms you walk through with your hands out, feeling for the solid parts. This is me putting my hands out and naming the solid parts I found. A dead man on my floor who stood back up. A dog under the table who waited for my voice and gave me enough courage to find the door. A ranger who told the truth. A fireman who picked up a shovel and made it a promise. 2 cats who ate when it was time to eat. A tower with a working radio. A woman at a gate who did not cry. A man who fixed small engines and still had use for plans. That is enough for a morning. That is enough to keep going into the afternoon. I am going now. I will come back. I am saying it out loud so the room hears it. I shoulder the bag. I check the sling. I set the crate near the door with a towel clipped to it, in case I need to carry cats again in a hurry. I tie a small bell to Baxter's harness so he is never a ghost at my heels. I put a clean towel over the injured man's legs. I tell Mark the same words one more time. 1 shot means fine. 2 means help. 3 means the ranger breaks a rule. He nods without the shovel handle in his hands this time. His hands are steady. The ranger writes a time on the map. I step into the light. The lot is empty. The air is cold. The road is quiet. The first day goes on. I go with it. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening till the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you. What moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel, especially with extra membership. Carlos Herrera, Luca Mod, Jadala, The Great Anywho, Madam Midnight. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares signing off.